I'm going to blend in the foreground, I'm going to blend in the middle ground. Wherever I'm blending, I'm going to make sure that I keep the same direction of mark that I use when I was coloring when I blend. Otherwise, all that work that I used on making the marks and choosing them carefully is going to go out the window. Whenever I decide to switch to a new topic or a new area, or whenever I start to feel that my blending stump is getting too dirty, I'm going to clean it. So when I switch between blending the grassland and blending the water, I'm definitely going to clean it. In fact, I'm going to clean both sides of the blending stump. As I start to blend the water, I keep in mind once again continuing to make my blending marks the same directional strokes that I made my coloring marks. This way everything gets a little bit of blue, but I can still see some very distinct parts of the color. This is going to help to make this drawing end up looking really great. I'm going to use the tip of my blending stump especially carefully in and around the edges of the grass and around the figure in the kayak as well. Making sure to color in the whole area to blend the whole set of water to get it all to a nice even sort of at least base tone. When it comes to the trees, I'm actually going to blend across them just as often as I blend up and down with those. Normally, blending in the opposite direction that you colored will get rid of the marks that you made to give you less of the texture that you're looking for. But when we're trying to do trees, it's worthwhile because it also adds a little bit of side-to-side texture, and it helps to give the sort of hazy, foggy, misty unknowableness that the forest often has. Once I've completed that, and everything looks good and in order, I can start to see the textures. Then I'm going to go back in, once again, working from the background forward, and I'm going to put a heavy layer of pressure where I need it. The benefit of using a light layer first and a heavy layer second on top of it are several. One, you get to plan things out and see how it's going to look. You get to make adjustments, as you've seen several times while I've been making this composition. I've had to make a few changes here and there and correct for errors, and that's just part of the process. Having a light pressure layer adds a depth and interest to the picture. It helps to develop the textures and the things that really make our artwork more interesting to look at, more enjoyable, more satisfying to create as well. It lets us have a more comfortable and effective blending of colors, especially like up here in the sky where I'm working right now. And it's going to make it so that we can develop really effective textures. So it's very, very worth taking the time to put a light layer first and a heavier layer after. I think you're going to feel that way too once we get done. Once I have a nice heavy pressure layer all over the whole thing and I've got my colors mixed how I want them to show the general outline of where I want each of them, then I'm going to go in with a clean blending stump and I'm going to blend this. I'm going to start by continuing the direction of the marks that I made to make the coloring, but I also may well and often do work in the opposite direction to get rid of some of those marks. Sometimes what I want to do is make sure that the whole area is filled in with a really nice, bright, vibrant color, and that's really what one of the things that oil pastels can do a great job of. You can get bright, rich colors, and leaving some spots a little bit undercolored is just a shame, so I don't like to mess around with that. Sometimes, if your blending stump is messy, you will get a bit of an error, and that's something that you can blend out, you can color over, you can scratch away and fix up that way. There's a number of solutions, and ultimately, you could also color back in around it, or just not worry too much about it. Once I've got everything blended, and I am going to go in and fill all those little empty or shy or shallow spots and just get a nice smooth transition across all my colors. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to look more carefully at the clouds. So I'm just making sure that everything is filled in, that everything is colorful, and that the transition from yellow to orange is smooth, from orange to red is great, and so on and so on and so on. Oil pastels are pretty malleable, which means you can move them quite a lot. So if I have a lot of areas like I do on this side that are a little bit lacking in color, I can spread what I've got around pretty far, which is a very nice feature. When it's time to look back at the clouds, I'm going to give them a base tone of a little bit of pink. Now, I see that the clouds are mostly in a black and blue area with a little bit in the violet or pinkish area. So, clouds often carry the colors of earlier stages of the sunset, meaning if I move back over toward the sun, if I look toward the right side of the page where the sun is setting, and I pick up some of those colors, maybe a little bit of orange, but a lot of that pink is going to carry in. I'm going to cover it with mostly a nice scumbly white to give a good feel for the texture and the sort of fluffiness of the clouds. I want them to be a little bit more blended, a little bit smoother in texture, but still have that scumbling feeling. And I often will want my clouds to be a little bit brighter on the bottom, more of the pink or yellow or orange showing, and a little bit darker on the top, which makes sense. They're catching the light of the sun on their bellies. Once I have my clouds in a nice way, I'm going to move on to the next step. Looking down, the next thing lower on the page is going to be the tree line. I'm going to start with a nice tree bark or tree trunk sort of color, kind of what we might call a raw umber, a nice warm orangey brown. I'm going to use that in a vertical mark just like tree trunks would grow, but I'm going to layer some other colors on top of it, so I'm leaving plenty of space and I'm making thin, skinny little lines. And I'm going to use some black and some dark brown on top of this because the tree line is not getting a lot of light, so it's probably going to be quite dark. So we want to make sure that it has that. This is the added benefit compositionally of having a strong contrast with how bright the water is and how bright the sun is especially. So this is going to make the whole area really pop nicely. I'm going to especially darken up the tops of the trees, and I'll use the darker brown in the lower sections of the area.